Now we're going to work on the steam dome, and there are two pieces that come out of lightweight chipboard. This one that is 1 3/4 by 4 7/8 has the 1/8 inch score lines on it. I cut this from a scrap left over from making the boiler. And then this other piece of lightweight chipboard does not have any scoring. It's 2 by 3.5. And then I've got, from medium weight chipboard, I have 3 circles that are 1 1/2 inches and 1 circle that is 1 1/4 inches. I also have some craft cardstock. This is just a 1-inch piece. There's no scoring on it, and it's the height 1 3/4 of the dome sides. And then I have a piece of cardstock joining strip that is the length here of the steam dome. So to cut the pieces for the sides and the top, we need some templates from our template sheet. We'll use this one labeled steam dome here. You can see the measurements match the measurements of our chipboard. We're just going to need to cut this curve on the edge, and when you cut out these templates, make sure to leave the black line, especially on this bottom curve. And then on this piece that has not been scored, we'll use this curved piece down here. It actually gets used for both this steam dome and the sand dome. So I'll cut out my templates and then I'll be back. So now I have my 2 pieces cut out, and I'm going to put a couple of markings on this larger piece, and I'm using the template and I'm lining up first one of the green dashed lines with one end. So I have this green dashed line lined up with the end over there. I'm just going to draw a line even, and then I'm going to do the same thing on the other end, line up that green line so that I have those 2 lines. Now those will help us to center it when we test fit this. So to test fit this, I'm going to join it together with some temporary adhesive. And then just drop my 3 1/2 inch circles down in there just to keep it in the right shape. And now we can take this over to the Locomotive and test the fit. So here's our Locomotive, and the steam dome is actually going to sit back here in between these two, the first 2 strips. But in order to test its fit, it's easier to see by looking right here on the end, and the curvature is the same. So I'm using that line that we drew to keep it centered and checking it back and front, and then I'm just going to check and see if the sides, see if I can get this on a little more of an angle. Once you have that in the right place, check and see if these sides are coming down, if everything is meeting here nicely. And it should, but if you need to trim anything, if let's say there's a gap here on the side, then in order to fix that gap, what you'd have to do is deepen the parts that come up. But it's sized to fit, it should fit very well with the dimensions in the template. So now I'll put the Locomotive to the side and take apart this temporary joining, and now we can go ahead and join the dome together. So first I'm going to take this strip of cardstock joining strip and put it on the inside and line up that edge with the top edge, and give that a good burnish. And then I'll take this little piece of 1-inch cardstock and use that right here for this join. Now, I don't know if you can see this, it's overhanging a little bit, so I'm just going to trim that back so that that joining strip doesn't interfere with the curvature. I'll go ahead and give that a burnish. And then just kind of train this to come around into a circle. And make sure you line your edges up evenly. Then reach in and give that join a good burnish. Now over here where the join is, it's not very circular, so just kind of work it with your fingers and thumb a little bit here to see if you can get that to be a little more circular over there. And then I'm going to take one of these 1.5 inch circles and glue it on the inside. And where I'm going to glue it is at the bottom of that cardstock joining strip. So it's ending up being about 3/8 of an inch down from the top. And once I have that circle glued in there, I'll just let it set up for a few minutes. So now the glue is set up enough for me to work with this piece. And what we're going to do is take this curved piece, and it's actually going to curve around the top to give us a kind of a slanted top to our dome. So I'm just taking this and kind of curving it, just using my fingers. You can see maybe that it's starting to curve around, just so it's starting to know that that's what we want to do with it. So just kind of work it around. You can see it's starting to come together into a kind of a circular kind of a thing. And now I have it kind of shaped like this. It's trained to go where we want it to go. So we'll take, I'm going to use this cardstock joining strip up here to attach it to the dome. I'm just going to snip about every 3/16 of an inch or so here. And then once I get all those little snips made, I'm just going to kind of put these guys gently towards the center. Now I'm looking for my seam, and here's my seam on the side of the dome. And I want to start putting this piece on kind of away from that. So I'm just turning it on its side and coming up to one of these lines. And what I'm going to do here is I want the edge of that chipboard, it's going to kind of curve. Just take your time. And it's going to end up making kind of a slanty thing in. So if you've got it trained, keep an eye on this edge here. It should just kind of meet so that it's not overhanging. And just work your way around slowly. And I've stopped here about 1 inch from where I started. I'm just going to put these little pieces of the joining strip out of the way and bring this over here and see how long it needs to be, and then trim it off. And then I'm also going to use a little wet glue right there on that join, just to kind of help it stay in place as we bring it along here. And then bring up our little joining strips. don't worry if some of these are a little bit too long. And then just go and use your fingers to burnish all that in really well. So then we'll have kind of a slanted top on our dome. Now in a couple of places the edge of my chipboard is kind of, there's like a little ridge right there. So I'm just going to take my emery board and knock that down a little bit just so I have a smooth transition all the way around. So then if any of the little pieces of the cardstock joining strip are sticking out, just kind of fold them back in. They'll actually give you a little more gluing area in our next step. So I'm just kind of folding them in a little bit. And then I'll put a bead of glue around here and take the 1 1/4 inch circle and fit that in at the top. And I'll get rid of any excess glue. Try to make sure that's on it nice and straight. It should be meeting up with the edges very nicely, and then we'll let that glue set up. So now we're ready to cover the steam dome with some pattern paper, and we're going to do this in several stages. And the first stage is to put paper around this slanted part. So I'm just taking my template and seeing how it fits around here. And over here at the end I can see it barely overlaps. So I'm going to use this as a pattern to cut my paper, but I know I'm going to want to elongate that by probably at least 1/8 of an inch, and between 1/8 and 1/4, so that if this is my curve here, I'll just extend this curve about 1/4 of an inch. So this is the paper I'm going to use for my steam dome. And I'm going to put the template on the reverse side, hold it back about 3/8 of an inch from the edge, coming this way because we're going to allow 3/8 of an inch on either side of this curve. And then at this end, I've held this back that 1/4 inch, which we talked about. So now I just want to draw or guesstimate a curve that is 3/8 of an inch bigger than the template and 3/8 of an inch smaller. So you could use a circle template or you could just guess. It's not critical, but just keep that as close to 3/8 of an inch on either side. And I'll cut that out and show you what I mean. And so I have my paper cut out, and you can see hopefully what I mean, that I've allowed 3/8 of an inch on the outside, 3/8 of an inch on the inside, and here's my little extra 1/4 inch down at that end. So now what we're going to do is remove the score tape backing, just kind of get it started. Don't remove the whole thing. I've removed about 1 inch or so of the backing. And then I'm staying away from where my seam was, and I'm just starting it by centering it on that slant edge. And then I can look at it from underneath here and just keep wrapping it around, keeping it centered. Now when you get back to the beginning here, you'll want to take a marker that matches and make sure you get this edge of white paper camouflaged. And then go ahead and finish putting that down. Give it a good finger burnish. And then what we'll do is we'll make a series of little slits so that we can wrap this down to the top and bottom. Now, instead of just taking slits, I'll probably take wedges out so that it can lay as flat as possible. And then before I stick these down, I'm also going to run a little bead of glue around, probably 1/8 of an inch or so in on the top. I have found that these small pieces like this, they don't always want to stay down, so I'm putting that little ring of glue in there. And then go ahead and just round these in. Kind of do it in a couple of stages. And give them a good burnish too. You want to be careful not to rest this bottom and put pressure on it because you'll damage the sides of the bottom here. So just always hold on to it and when you're putting any pressure on it. And you can put good pressure on it by going upside down and putting some pressure on it that way. And then we'll follow the same procedure to make a series of cuts along this bottom edge. I'm just using smaller scissors since there's less room there. And then go ahead and put a little bead of glue and make sure all of these little tabs are staying down. I've just put some rubber bands around my bottom edges to hold them while they're gluing. And we can finish up the top while that's happening. So I'm going to measure my opening here. I've adjusted the size of the paper, so my opening is a little bit bigger than yours will be. Yours will probably be more like 1/2 inch. And I just want to fill in with a punch circle so that when I put the decorative paper on here on the top, it won't want to sink in. So I've just cut a little cardstock circle here with some score tape on the back. I'm just going to fill that in. And then do a little inking. And then here I've cut 1¼ inch circle, and I've inked the edges, and it's going to fit right on top. Now if you have directional paper, remember that the steam dome, that the sides that are longer are the sides that come down on either side of the locomotive. So where we drew our lines, that's the front and the back. So if you have directional paper and that you think that matters, then go ahead and align that how you would see fit. So before we put decorative paper on the outside, we again want to fill in with a little bit of cardstock just so that we'll get a smoother finish. And if we take our template and wrap it around here, we'll see that it's not quite long enough. It's probably about 1/4 inch shy. So what I'm going to do is use this template, but add 1/8 inch on either end. And go ahead and cut that out. And once I have it cut out, I'll hold it up right along the bottom edge of that decorative paper and kind of look underneath here and see how much needs to be cut off of the straight end for it to fit. So you don't want it to overhang the bottom chipboard edge at all. So just, here I can see, if I just put my ruler in there, I've got about 3/16 of an inch. You may have less. So I'll just trim that off. And once you've trimmed it off, go ahead and try it on here. If you have any overlap, I have just a tiny bit of overlap here on the end. I'm going to trim that off because I don't want to have any overlap. It's better to be a tiny bit too short than have overlap. And once I have that sized and I've checked my edges down here at the bottom, I'll go ahead and put some score tape on that and attach it to the dome. So now for the decorative paper on the outside, I've cut a piece that is 5 3/4 by 1 3/4. I've inked all of the edges. I've prepped it with score tape, and make sure you put score tape going vertically on the 2 short edges first and then put some on the other edges. And the reason for doing that is that when we go to attach this, we just want to attach one end first to make sure we're going to stay nice and straight. Now, I have the seam on one of my indented edges, and I'm going to put the other seam near there as well, because that's going to be the side that faces the cab. So I'm just kind of test fitting this around here to see where that will end up, so I can see where I want to start. They don't have to be in perfect alignment, but somewhere close. So I've just made a little mark where I want to start. If you're using directional paper like I am, you'll want to make sure that you've got it facing the right direction. Now I'm just removing one end, and before I get it stuck down, I'm just going to kind of see where it's going to go, and then I'm looking over here to my long edge. I'm also just kind of holding it back just a little bit from where the slant begins. And when I've got it kind of all lined up, and I'm checking my side edges there to make sure they're coming down by past the chipboard. Actually, I think I'll change the dimension to cut this paper in a note, because it would be easier if you don't have to pay attention to getting that exact on the bottom. So when you get to this part, you'll have some overhang down here, so you won't have to be so concerned about that, because we'll make this paper 2 inches wide. And then I'll go ahead and stick that tab down. And now that I have that end stuck down, I can go ahead and remove the rest of my score tape backing and complete attaching this piece. So I have my paper all attached. I've done a good burnishing, and now I can just peek in and use my scissors and follow right along the edge of that chipboard. Make sure that edge is burnished down, and give it some inking. So now we'll finish off with this last 1.5 inch chipboard circle. You can see I've darkened the edges around it on both sides, and also used my 1/4 inch punch to make an opening in the middle so I can put my finger through it. And I just want to put this in on the inside here, making sure it does not come down any further than these dips here. So I'll put that in and then show you what I mean. So here's my circle. I think if I hold it this way, hopefully you can see that it's not extending past this dent in here. So that's just going to give us just a little bit extra gluing surface there. And then I'm going to put a piece of trim, and I've decided where this seam is in the back here, this dent here, that's where I'm going to start it and just wrap it around. And I'm keeping it right next to the edge of the decorative paper that we put on there. So I'll go ahead and get that strip attached. And then I've cut an 1 3/4 inch circle out of black cardstock, and this will just be slightly bigger than the bottom. I thought that it looked better if it was just a little bit of black there, and but I didn't want very much, so I decided that an 1 3/4 inch was what worked for me. Now you can try it on the Locomotive without it or with a bigger circle and just see what you like, but that's what I'm going to use. So I'll just put a little bead of wet glue around the edge here, and then I'll also just put a little bit here in the middle area. And then you won't see very much of this, so you just have to kind of be careful with it and put some good pressure on that and allow it to firm up. Now our steam dome is going to be put in place, centered between these two pieces of trim. Of course, you'll want to make sure that it is sitting on there plumb. And I'm going to use wet glue to do this, just in case I need to move it at all. But I'll probably make some little pencil tick marks, and then if you look at it from the end, you can use the windows to help you keep it plumb. So just put some wet glue underneath that black circle and then hold it on there with some pressure for a moment and allow it to dry. And there's our steam dome attached.